Happy Saturday, y'all. Yes, what an incredible way to spend a Saturday talking about green space and all things conservation. I'm so excited about today's conversation. For those of you who don't know who I am Jared Williams. I do a lot of things, but I'm a guy from Fort Worth who loves Fort Worth a whole lot. And I happen to serve also on the Fort Worth City Council representing District 6. The best district. And Zeta might have something to say about that. Which represents far southwest Fort Worth and the historic Lake Como neighborhood. So indeed an honor to be able to share in this space with you all. I also really love green spaces, so much so I wrote a whole dissertation on grasses. If you're looking for some casual reading before you go to bed, that'll probably make you go to sleep. It's the American Lawn Addictions, and it talks about our society's addictions to high-intensive landscapes using Bermuda grass, which is the cosmopolitan weed of the world. Enough nerding out. This is going to be a fun conversation because we have so many amazing people who are champions of all things conservation and open space. And so before we get started, I want to do a quick activity. I want you to repeat after me. Say land, plants, soil, water, energy, air. Okay, I think we're all warmed up for today's conversation. That was the stress nexus for those of you who don't know, but let's dive in. Today we're going to have a wonderful conversation about open space. And before we do that, I would love to do a round of introductions. We have some amazing people here with me, and so if y'all would, let's just go from this side down to that side. Tell us who you are and what in life led you to this space, and let's try to do that in a minute each.
Oh, okay, that's a challenge. So I'm Brandi Kelp, and I actually oversee the city's open space conservation program. And my background, I was a geology undergrad after trying engineering and a few other things that I wasn't feeling it. But I really fell in love with field geology and being outdoors, and I pursued my master's in environmental science, and my publication was on the urban heat island in Dallas-Fort Worth. So really familiar between the intersection of the built environment and the natural environment. And so I developed the city's environmental master plan when I was in our environmental team, and then now I'm in stormwater overseeing open space.
Thank you, Ray.
Hi, I'm Hannah Johnson, and I am a Natural Scientist Supervisor with the Park and Rec Department. So some of you may not know, but we have a Rolling Hills tree farm, and so I oversee that tree farm. We provide trees free to the citizens of Fort Worth through two programs, our neighborhood tree planting program and our tree grant program. I'm probably the newest to Fort Worth in this room. I've been with the city a little over 2 years. My degree is in agroecology with a minor in horticulture, so it's always been kind of a passion and a background of mine, I guess, horticulture since a young age, so that's kind of how I ended up here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caleb Roberts. I'm an urban planner, but I'm actually here on behalf of Downwinders at Risk, which is a environmental...
Sounds like you got some company.
Yeah. I can't see, but love the support. But Downwinders at Risk is an environmental justice organization tasked with helping disadvantaged communities get industry pollutants out of their communities. I actually have a history working in Fort Worth as well. I organized in Lake Como with people like Estrus Tucker. I did a lot of organizing around the public housing, Butler Place and Cavill, that have both relocated. So I was working with a lot of residents there. So long history with Fort Worth, and excited to be here.
Welcome to the space.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Haley Samsel, and I'm the environmental reporter for the Fort Worth Report. I've been reporting on the environment in Tarrant County since 2020, so about 3 years or so. I used to work for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and I came here through a program called Report for America, which places a bunch of local journalists all over the country. I don't have all the fancy degrees in environmental studies. I'm surrounded by people who know a lot more about the environment than I do. But I do think I've covered a lot of issues around the city and around the region, around air quality, water, the impact of natural gas drilling on our city and on the communities that are near fracking. And I've also covered groups like Downwinders at Risk, and sort of the activism that's going on in our region around all of these issues and environmental justice. So I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Let's give a round of applause. So before we dive into discussion, I think context is important. And so I would love for y'all to talk a little bit about the ecosystem that we're in. For those of y'all who don't know, we're in one of my favorite prairies, the Fort Worth Prairie. Go figure. But it's a part of the Great Plains, and I would love for y'all to just kind of give us context on what the landscape and ecosystem here means to you.
For open space, one of the things that we're trying to do is capture different parts of the ecosystem. So, you've got your riparian corridors, the Trinity River, is a significant part of the lifeblood of actually Dallas and Fort Worth. So we're trying to capture those riparian areas as well as upland, the Fort Worth Prairie. We've got a little bit of Blackland Prairie here. We've got highly endangered eastern cross timbers, woodland and forest, as well as a little bit of western cross timbers. And so we use data from Texas Parks and Wildlife and other sources when we are prioritizing open space across Fort Worth to try and make sure that we're capturing those different ecosystems and habitats.
And just to piggyback off of what Brandi said, so we're in the Cross Timbers region, and so that's predominantly post oak and some blackjack oak. So as Fort Worth is expanding, post oak are very do not sustain, don't just do well with machinery or any type of change, and so really preserving that post oak areas is important to us. At the tree farm, we're growing native trees that we collect seed here locally. Post oak is one that's really hard to get germinated, but that is one we are working on. So we really, trees that we're providing to the community are trees that are for this ecosystem, grow well in this area, and are easy for homeowners to deal with.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the exact area, so you won't get that from me.
I'll throw you out.
Well, I got something on that I can talk about, though. It's like you look at things like the Trinity and you look at certain neighborhoods who have access to that type of beauty. If you have a city with these type of natural attractions, who has access to be able to take their kids out there to do activities on a daily basis, and do we make that accessible for everyone? Are there other parts of the areas in different communities that we can accentuate some of their natural resources? Those are the kind of things that I'm looking at, especially given what's there. Can we redo some of that land use to make sure that open space is accessible for everyone?
Yeah, echoing what Caleb said, I am no expert on the riparian landscape of Fort Worth, but I will say that, something that Brandi will speak to is that we are losing a lot of prairie every year to development. In 2019, they estimated that the city of Fort Worth was losing 2,800 acres per year, something in that ballpark, to development. And tallgrass prairie, which is, one of the predominant ecosystems here, is one of the most endangered in the country. There's very little of it left, and I think that's why so many advocates are so intent on preserving it for as long as possible, and having areas where people can go that are not necessarily parks, but are structured areas to experience nature. And that's sort of what Caleb was referring to, is allowing people to experience this landscape as it was originally intended.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much for that. Another activity. Are y'all ready? Everyone say ecosystem services.
Ecosystem services.
Gretchen Daly is an amazing scholar, and she defined those services as the conditions and processes through which natural ecosystems and the species that make them up sustain and fulfill human life. Right? We think about ecosystem services, some of us do and some of us don't, and yet whether we do or not, our ecosystem provides so many services, from cleaning our air, cleaning our water, also storing our water to prevent things like flash flooding, et cetera. And you heard from all of these folks the importance of those ecosystem services, from the benefits they provide to us in terms of natural resources, and also the aesthetic value that they provide. When we talk about ecosystem services and development, right, there's some things that y'all brought up in each one of your lines of work that I want to highlight real quick. And so Brandi, open space, there's so much work that your program and your team have been doing to try to preserve some of those ecosystem services. Can you share with folks who may not know what the open space program has done, and specifically maybe highlight the big news that we got about the bond funding and all that good
absolutely.
stuff?
I love bragging on our program. So open space has moved at a pace I've never seen in city government. It started as an idea in 2019, and today we've preserved over 200 acres, and we've got another 200 acres in the pipeline. We worked with the Trust for Public Land to create a prioritization tool. It is a publicly available tool. We are very insistent that everything that we do in our program be 100% transparent and available to the public. I worked with 65 stakeholders developing our strategy report, which includes the policies that we'd like to see around open space in the city. We pulled in over 100 data sets that we use for prioritization. And we focused on ecosystem preservation, community health, recreation, stream, river, and lake health, flood control, economic development, all of these different areas, and brought those together in order to prioritize. And so we looked at where there's gaps in our existing parks and open space, where are our disadvantaged communities, and we use things like the EPA's environmental justice indicators and prioritize those areas. We're looking at trail connections. I'm currently working with the Transportation and Public Works Department and their master plan on how to link these open spaces to existing parks and open space and bring them into communities that don't currently have access. So it's a huge scope. I meet with 13 departments every week and review these spaces and the programs throughout the city that run tangentially to open space.
So incredible. Thank you, Brandi. Hannah, Brandi brought up earlier about the urban heat island effect, and trees play a huge role in mitigating that. Can you talk a little bit about how folks here can get involved with your tree programs that you offer?
It's really easy. So if you want some trees in your neighborhood, there's two options. So our neighborhood tree planting program, we provide free 5-gallon trees to parkways. So that's between curb and sidewalk, or the new rule is curb up to 20 feet in. So I need a coordinator for the neighborhood. And we like to try to get at least 25 homes. And so what happens is I send out a list that's curated for that neighborhood of what trees I have available that would grow well for them. They can then select what trees they want, and I go through and make sure that, they say they need 5 trees. They don't have space for 5 trees in their yard. But pretty much everybody gets a tree. We deliver that to a central location in the neighborhood, and then homeowners pick it up and they get to plant. And our hope is that they are planting in that intended parkway area. If you want trees in parks or any public space within the community that you're in, that's our tree grant program. And that application is due every year, September 15th. This can go to libraries, schools, parks, medians. And those are trees, again, that we grow locally. These trees are larger, so they're about 3.5 inches in diameter. They can be in large containers or ball and burlap. So really the big thing there is who's watering these trees. That's the most important thing when we plant a tree is, making sure that it can get established. And so our biggest issue is water. We can only water trees that are in city parks. So I have a water truck that goes through. So it's a little more of an application process and to see who's planting, who's watering, and it gets awarded by steps and systems. So whether it's on irrigation, who's planting it, what is that tree diversity or already look in that neighborhood? Do they have a lot of trees in this park compared to other locations that have applied? So we kind of go through those steps to award each year.
Thank you so much for that, Caleb. I'm gonna throw it alley-oop as promised. You talked about a lot of the work that you do with environmental justice, which is so critical. Sure. Not everyone may know what environmental justice is in this room, right? And so can you share what does that look and feel like for you? And then would you also talk about kind of the importance of environmental justice in your work to ensure that folks have access to green spaces?
Definitely. For those who don't know, environmental justice is really looking at the history of our land use and why certain people have to deal with certain things that pollute them or impact their communities. So, for example, we all know that land use in a lot of major cities and a lot of cities across the U.S. was formed by, racism and discrimination, which segregation, redlining, all of these things push certain people into some certain parts of a city. And what that also did was push other uses that people didn't want to be around, like industry, into those same areas. So now you have, even that was 1940 or 1930, you said that's a long time ago. Well, these things don't just move. Industries just don't move. Businesses are tenured. They stay for a long time. So you have established communities with a lot of industry around them. And even if you make a policy, well, we're not going to do that anymore, these communities still have to deal with, the history of those industries around. So justice looks at, not only do we make a policy to not do that anymore, we need some redress in the ability to look at where people are and make sure that we're prioritizing the people of our community, our residents, and making sure they're living in a healthy environment. So what ends up happening, if you look at a lot of disadvantaged communities and why EJ work is so effective, is because if you take those industries away, you will see that there's a thriving natural environment there that hasn't been utilized, that isn't accessible, just because of that history of racism in the beginning. So we have a lot of that even here in Fort Worth. We're working with Echo Heights. There's that component there. You can look at Diamond Hill North Side. There's a lot of areas in Fort Worth you can look at, and if you say we take that industry away, what does that community now have to work with, and what kind of opportunities to build natural, better neighborhoods are there? And I think you'll find that it's really impactful if we look at it from that lens.
And I want to add something to that. So there's now 1940s redline data available nationwide. When we pulled the data for Fort Worth into our open space map and laid it over the current environmental justice indicators, it's really close. So, things that happened decades ago, policies that were made decades ago are still impacting residents today. And it's really stark when you see that original data set laid on top of what's still happening right now.
One of the other challenges that's facing communities like Echo Heights, which is in southeast Fort Worth near Stop 6, is that a lot of the parks that are near those communities have not seen a lot of investment. You also see this in the historic South Side with Glenwood Park, which is recently kind of undergoing a revitalization effort by the neighbors there. But something that people have expressed is that they've always felt like there's a lack of playground equipment, there's a lack of resources sent to those places, and so they kind of become like these eyesores for the community rather than a resource for the people who live there. And so I think that's also another element of the environmental justice that Caleb was bringing up, is where do we direct our resources as a city?
Right on. Can we give a couple snaps? This is this is heavy. Also, let's take a deep breath. Everyone breathe in. Let's keep going. We've dived into a number of issues in different parts of the city, and when we think about environmental issues, there's a lot of depth and breadth when we talk about the volume of issues that our city interacts with. Can y'all just talk through what are some of the issues that Fort Worth, both residents and the city, should be focusing their attention to, and maybe geo-reference that, if you will. What part of the city should we be focusing on those kinds of things?
Oh, goodness. I work
Hard
all
question.
over the city. One thing that we are trying to do right now is capture a lot of the prairie that's in West Fort Worth in the extraterritorial jurisdiction. We're focused there because, frankly, it's some of the last land that we can afford. But it's also some of the last land with virgin prairie. And so we're trying to, when we're looking at these areas, we're trying to connect them together. Primrose Station is a good example of that. And we took a little bit different approach in Fort Worth in that we're trying to work with the development community. They were part of our stakeholder group. And Primrose is a good example of this. We had a developer that was putting in a little bit higher density multifamily units near Lake Benbrook, which has U.S. Army Corps property on it. And we are purchasing 40 acres of open space that includes wetland. We've already got the delineation on it for basically the price of the community park that's going in. It's well below market rate, but what that capital that we're providing to the developer is going back into that development there, and is helping to make that possible. And we're looking at ways we can do that with companies that are trying to move here where they may not need all the land, and it could be high priority open space for us, and that becomes a draw that, you know, people want to visit open space. I bought a house next to open space because you know, it does impact your quality of life. So I'm a poster child for that. And so we're trying to, you know, convince developers that leaving some of these spaces, we can work with them to show where their priorities are in their developments. And if they preserve that, it's a boon to the community, and we can also make those trail connections to connect it to other spaces in the city and have that trail system that's also a really beneficial amenity, you know, for community health, recreation, mental health, so many different aspects of life.
Right on, and that connectivity is so key. It's not just for this. It's not just for the sake of trails, right? It's also for the sake of the ecosystem and the wildlife that dwells within, right? It creates connectivity so that our wildlife isn't having to take the Chisholm Trail toll road, right? That would be the last thing we'd want for anyone. Talk about public safety issues, huh? But you bring up such good points there, and I just wanted to highlight that, Brandi. Let's please continue.
I think one thing I didn't hit is that our department, you know, I'm within Parks and Rec and Forestry. We work with, obviously we're part of the city, but we work with the neighborhood improvement plans that are in place. So we were part of Rosemont. We provided trees to that neighborhood. That's a little different than our neighborhood oh wow, our NTPP. I'm so used to saying that. That we send out postcards to all the homes in that neighborhood for them to have a chance to have a tree, so they can mail that postcard back or scan the QR code to say they want a tree, and we hand deliver those trees to those homes. Those trees are labeled, those trees have QR codes on how to plant. Right now we're working with Como, and that's a little bit different this year, where there were funds set aside that a contractor actually will plant these trees for the neighbors, for the neighborhood, and water those trees for up to 2 years. So that's something different that has not been done yet. So that's something we're trying. We've had great response. I'm almost capped at this point with trees, and it's only been a week since I've mailed it, so that's wonderful. I can say all those homes there, most of them that wanted a tree truly don't have a tree in that parkway. So it'll be great to see, you know, some diversity and some trees going into that neighborhood. So.
For me, we're really working with neighborhood autonomy. I think when you start talking to neighborhoods about what they want, you'll see that open space, parks, recreation is a mainstay of what people come up with naturally. It's not something you have to prompt them to do. And just speaking on this issue, I was just at Fort Worth City Council last Tuesday speaking on this, so it's very fresh, you know. But speaking on behalf of Echo Heights in the sense of the city needs a neighborhood planning component. Some of these things can't be done on such a large area. And actually I want to talk about how even large area plans sometimes put undue tension on especially disadvantaged communities. So what happens is you have property owners who have been there a long time and neighborhoods who want to change how their environment is. And from a city's standpoint, well, we have to respect those property owners, those industries, because they're important to the region. And if you couple that with the history I just told you about how they were put there, it's like we can't change it because the region needs it and you have to pay the price. So if you look at it from a neighborhood planning perspective, what power do we give to neighborhoods to be able to plan out what they want and to pull out some of that natural things that us as people all want together? We don't have that. And I wish we had a component well, that's what we're organizing for, is a component into Fort Worth's ability to allow neighborhoods to do that, to fund those as well, because you can't just plan it, you have to fund something with it. And I think those two things are a fight in which you can allow some of these neighborhoods to start talking about, hey, we've been here, our family's been here for 80, 100 years, we know what this area can be, let us plan that.
Caleb, let me just piggyback on
Go
that.
ahead.
You brought up something Tuesday night that resonated with me. Of course, I
Oh,
couldn't
yeah.
say anything. Here's a better form of public comment, right?
Yeah, sure.
But you talked a lot about the importance of comprehensive planning for cities. I mean, you also talked about cities that have worked with industry to incentivize relocation for
Definitely.
environmental justice efforts. Can you talk about that? I thought it was really
Yeah,
really awesome.
and I don't want to go too deep because there's the state of Texas has some new laws that make this complicated. I don't want to go too deep into that.
Keep it surface
Yeah,
level.
but what I want to say is a city, especially the size of Fort Worth, especially here in Fort Worth, you have the ability to locate a lot of these industries in a similar place. You can create a plan, whether you call it an industrial park, industrial, area, whatever you want to name it. There is space in Fort Worth for us to co-locate those businesses. It's actually maybe a benefit to them as well. But you can take a part of town, co-locate them away from residents, away from established neighborhoods, in a sense of where you can still get your industrial uses because we still need them at some point. It's not to say that they're all bad, but we know that they don't mix with residential neighborhoods. So there is a way that Fort Worth can create a plan to relocate these industries into a certain part of town, have that be an industrial park, and have that all the resources that they need be located there. That is good for truck traffic as well. If you have semi trucks going through your neighborhood, all of these things are better used. So residences and community spaces can be community spaces, and industrial spaces can be that. And that is the core of why zoning was created, was to separate both of those. So I think Fort Worth has the ability to do that.
Thank you so much.
I need to say,
okay.
get involved at your state level too. It's not enough just
Yeah.
local level, because the state passed a slew of, they might have become law. I haven't followed up, but they have some bills on the books that are restricting park dedication, what I'm able to do with open space, a lot of different things that historically have been the purview of the local level. We're now in the crosshairs, and there's more and more restrictions on what we're able to do every day. So yes, get involved here, also get involved in Austin.
I think kind of adding to what Caleb was saying, I've been covering the Echo Heights, coalition and a lot of the activism they've been doing since like early 2022. So it has been kind of an ongoing effort. I think one of the problems you see with that situation, or one of the challenges, is that that area has been designated as an industrial growth center. So they have kind of done what Caleb's referring to in terms of like they decided that they were going to group all of these industrial facilities together. The problem with that is that there's an elementary school nearby. Literally, we're talking about less than a half mile away. Maybe it's like down the street. And then you also have, a park and residences and mobile home park nearby. And I think one of the issues that I've seen, this is not my personal opinion, by the way, I promise, I'm not editorializing here, but a lot of people there have said, like, we didn't have consent in that process. We were not notified. We were not part of that kind of comprehensive plan process of wanting what we want for our neighborhood. So right now, and I know Councilmember Williams will probably mention this, there is this effort that's going on to revamp the comprehensive plan for the entire city. And that's something that will be happening over the next year or so. They're going to begin public input meetings around the city in early 2024. So it's not far away. And they're referring to it as the 2050 comprehensive plan. So this is something that will shape the city for the next 25 years. And this hasn't been undertaken since 2000. So if you can imagine how different the city looks now compared to what it was in 2000, it's insane. So I think the city is going through this moment of transforming some of its public input processes as well. I think, there is a lot more opportunity for people to get involved. And I think there's a lot of folks in the Southeast Fort Worth area and, activism groups like Downwinders that are kind of demanding that space. And so that's definitely something to have on your radar.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Let's give another round of snaps. We have time for a few questions from the audience. Are there any takers? Right here in the front.
Okay, so hi, I'm Jessica Brazil with UL Solutions. I live here locally in Fort Worth. I lived here for 10 years. I'm hearing a lot of be involved in the local level, but then also on the state level or international level, whatever your influence is. I am on my local HOA board, for instance, and we are having a lot of issues with, in terms of getting the message across to plant local, Texas stuff that doesn't require a lot of watering. So, do you guys come and speak at like HOAs, meetings? Because I actually have a meeting coming up, and I would love to invite you to, so you can maybe get that message across to some people that have lived here for a long time that are continuing to plant a lot of things that are using a lot of water.
Bermuda grass. Oh, sorry. Wow, something came over me.
There's only so much I can do because I just moved there like a year ago, and a lot of the people that live there have lived there for 60 years, and they're continuing to plant whatever they want to plant. And I'm trying to let them know that Fort Worth has guidelines in place. I work for UL Solutions. We are a safety marketing verification global entity, and they're not listening to me, but maybe they'll listen to you.
It sounds like we have some connections to make.
Yes, and there's some great resources locally, Native Plant Society of Texas, the Master Gardeners that are also really great resources. And I feel your pain because my HOA wouldn't let me go beyond 50% grass removal. So I got some drought tolerant zoysia. I pulled out all the Augustine and Bermuda grass and, planted a pollinator garden. At the same time, it's an uphill battle a lot of times with our HOAs. Even with laws on the books, they can still restrict how much you're able to do. Yeah.
You might be able to help, and I'm on the board, so I can help get the message across. I just need to get you in front of the people that are standing in the
I'll get
way.
you my card, and I'll give you a list of people.
There we go. I see a hand in the back. We got two more.
All right, so, love y'all's take, and Councilman and I have visited on this before, but we still live in a city that, and I'm representing the east side, I've taken off every other hat that y'all all seen me have today. We still live in a city that it's easier for a developer to level every tree on a site and say, oops,
Okay.
than to pay homage to these beautiful heritage oaks that we have. And we have canopy rules that say you have to replace the canopy, but we don't necessarily hold them accountable. And I don't want canopy rules that say you have to replace the canopy. I want penalties that say you should not have touched them, because it's easier to tear them down and put back a few little trees that'll take 100 years to replace what's been on my side of town and throughout our entire beautiful city. What are y'all's takes on how do we incentivize doing the right thing when it comes to keeping these heritage trees? And I work for a construction company. I understand you can't build A5 lots in an old forest, but then maybe we shouldn't have A5 lots everywhere. Filled with Bermuda grass, full circle, I got you. What are y'all's takes on how do we incentivize doing the right thing when it comes to preserving the canopy that we have left?
So the city is I know I'm like speaking for you guys, but the city is undertaking like
You're hired.
the urban, they're doing an urban forestry master plan right now. You've probably heard about, where they're kind of taking a closer look at some of the ways that they punish developers for clear cutting a bunch of trees. The East Side's problems, this is just from me living in Fort Worth and covering it for 3 years, the East Side's problems are so different from any part of the city, because the East Side has like so much of that canopy cover already, and so people really care about the trees. I think some of the developer issues also come down to, so an aspect that I covered in East Fort Worth, like in the John T. White area, is the fact that there's been a lot of residents who have said the city does not have the staffing to enforce a lot of the urban forestry code issues. They also, at times, like, citizens will report things, and then code compliance will come down, and then they'll say, we don't see anything today, so then they leave. This is just things that people have told me. And so some residents of the John T. White neighborhood have actually, like, gone to the EPA and got an EPA, like, officer, the Region 6 office, to issue like a notice of violation to the developer that then kind of got kicked back to the city. So people are kind of having to go to all different levels to get that to happen. In terms of incentives, I think that will be something that's a big part of the urban forestry master plan, which I think is finishing up later this year, and it did have some community input. Yeah.
Let's do one more question,
Yeah.
and then we'll do last words.
It's really hard to see.
For the tree planting program, is there a program or part of that program that would be able to be used along major thoroughfares? So like a good example would be like Altamira. If you're going west on 30 and head south on 183 or Altamira, I mean, it's just concrete. There's a walkway on the west side, but like, I don't know anybody that wants to walk down that thing.
Yeah.
So like, is there something to provide shade for walkways that are
So that, that could go to tree grant. We run into, is that city, is that TxDOT, who owns that area? And I know they are plans, depending on, different areas as to how to get trees into that area, whether it be, a developer that has paid into the tree fund and we were saying these trees need to go here. But really, at least from my standpoint, it depends on who actually owns that area and that land, for what I can do at least.
Also, how do we water them? That's
Yeah.
one of the biggest
Yeah.
roadblocks in getting them up, is getting them water, because even if they're drought tolerant, even if they're native, they need 2 to 3 years at least of continual watering to get them established.
And that's more than just putting in an irrigation system, because we all know those can break. And within a matter of days, we drive by and those trees are dead. So who's managing, who's taking care of that to make sure that that becomes a beautiful area?
Awesome. Thank y'all so much for y'all's questions. I really appreciate that. Let's do a lightning round, a lightning round call to action. If you had 30 seconds to a minute, which you do, what would be the action that you would give from your perspective? We'll start with you, Haley, and come back this way.
Yeah, so as a reporter, I'm going to do another disclaimer that I am not like telling you to join groups and donate and all these things, but I will list a couple groups that have been working on this issue in Fort Worth. There's the Native Prairies Association of Texas Fort Worth chapter that does a lot of preservation work, and they take people on tours of different prairies in the area. They also work with developers to preserve. There's also the Fort Worth Climate Safe Neighborhood Coalition, which is led by a group of TCU professors and people in the historic South Side who are trying to, I would say, like restore parks around the city and drive funding to those areas. There's also the Great Plains Restoration Council, which is a group that takes juvenile, like people who are in the juvenile justice system, kids, to the prairie and actually allows them to like do some of the service work that they're required to do, but connects them with the land. And they also run a farm that's in near Crowley.
District 6.
Yeah, District 6. And it's called Conundrum Farms, and that also brings a lot of youth down and kind of connects them to the land. And yeah, so those are like some opportunities that you might have to look into getting involved yourself.
Yeah, for me, I would say that why I think environmental justice is important is because environmental work in general can be sometimes a little overarching. Like you struggle to connect everybody with it, or people don't know where to start. And I think doing the community work, you can see how people are negatively impacted when those natural things aren't there, and what their livelihood could be if you put some work. And I think that is a way to get people interested in the whole city and all of these different things that all these great people know and understand and work with all the time. So that justice work can open up doors for people who are right now not connected at all to the great things in the city.
I think what I would say is I see a lot of groups, I take volunteer groups out at the tree farm actually, and I think a lot of it is education. Educating the people of, what kind of environment we have, what trees grow well, but knowing where to reach out and where to find this information within your community. The city is large. This is the largest city I've worked for, and different departments under just different departments that you would think, oh, I wouldn't even think to look there for this, and we have somebody. So knowing, what all we have available, I think is really key. And that's, that's not only just us city, there's Extension Office, there's other groups out there that are very helpful to this community that if you're looking and interested, that's what I would say, reach out, educate yourself. And, I have kid groups that come out. I am from a rural area in Nebraska, and it is shocking how many people don't know how to use a shovel, to me, so I love to teach kids how to, get their hands dirty, be proud and be excited of, this tree that they're growing from seed. And then that takes part, and they get more involved and say, I want a tree in my neighborhood or in my front yard, or I want to have this, my park needs more trees, so, that education and sharing that with even the younger community, I think, for me is key.
For the open space program directly, we've got the prioritization tool online, and I encourage everyone to go in and take a look at that and let us know if you know of properties that become available that our team might be interested in. That's word of mouth referral is how we've acquired most of our properties. And then at that local governmental level, pay attention to where your city's your tax dollars, pay attention to those budget priorities and where those are going. We received the 2022 bond funds, $15 million for open space, woo, but that's 50% gone at this point, and land values are climbing. So, vote in your local bond elections. It's really important, and it drives policy when you're reaching out to your council members and to city leadership. They listen to you a lot more than they're going to listen to us. So I encourage every one of you to start communicating. Let everyone know what you want to see in your community.
Awesome, thank y'all. And just a note, I wasn't one of those council members she was just referencing. I love to listen. I'm going to take a point of personal privilege and also say what I would hope that y'all would take action on. A couple things y'all heard about, several of the plans, the urban forestry plan and the comprehensive plan. It's so important that you give your input in that. I am only as effective in governing as the input that I get, right? This is all of our seat. This isn't Jared Williams' seat. And so you engaging in that process allows us to create plans that remedy a lot of these issues that we're facing. The other thing is our office was proud to work with city staff to establish a zoning alert notification. It's now in city news. You don't have to wait for your HOA board to send you that alert. You can subscribe yourself and you can get all the alerts by district for any zoning change requests that are happening, which is so important in the land use conversations. We want to make sure that the land use is compatible with our neighborhoods, and so getting those alerts allows you to get in the game and make your voice heard to the council. The last couple things I'll say is it's budget season, and I have the privilege of chairing on the Neighborhood Revitalization Committee, and it's so important. This budget season is so important for that committee because we recently developed a neighborhood conservation strategy that is going to be presented before the council this week, and the council will have to adopt it. They can vote up or down, but as a part of that plan, there's one thing that's really important in that, and that's funding in this budget to expand the neighborhood improvement program. We know neighborhoods are building blocks to a very strong city, but currently the neighborhood improvement program only allows for one neighborhood to be revitalized per year. And if we worked on revitalizing one neighborhood per year, we'd be working a long time. And so this fund expands it doubles the program to where we're doing 2 neighborhoods per year. And the conservation strategy allows us to work on 6 neighborhoods at one time, each in different phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, 3-year program, right? So we effectively get to work on 6 neighborhoods per year, which is able to accomplish a number of the things that Caleb was just mentioning. But none of that matters if the budget doesn't get passed with that in it, right? And so ensuring that your voices are heard, if that's something that you think is important, we need to hear from you. The last thing is there's also plans in this budget to establish an environmental department. I don't know if that's what it's going to be called, but it'll house a lot of programs that we're talking about, from industrial code compliance to solid waste. open space, parks maybe? Parks? I
We don't know what's,
We don't know what's
open
gonna-
space might go to parks because they do our maintenance, so that's up in the air right now.
So, needless to say, if this sounds interesting and this is something that you want to see in the budget, please make your voice heard on that. Not to say that these are all the things that need to be, that these are going to be the magic solutions to the challenges we heard today, but it's certainly work being done to move towards that direction. And so, thank y'all so much for sitting in a conversation about green space. When they sent me the email today, or earlier this week, I was not sure how many people would actually want to be in this kind of conversation, but it gives me so much hope and inspiration to see all of y'all on the edge of your seats, rolling up your sleeves, ready to get to work. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank y'all so much for engaging in this conversation. And it's not just a conversation, the work must go on. And so please find your niche and help us accomplish all of the goals that we've been talking about today. Thank y'all and be blessed. Take care.